So today we're discussing our hopes regarding what comes next for Digimon, how to keep the flame burning and elevate the franchise. And to discuss a topic like this, we need to bring in support, which is why one of my favorite Digimon YouTubers, Karn EX, is joining us on the channel today. Karn, welcome.
Hey man, how's it going?
What's kind of on the horizon or what we would like to see that we don't have any real confirmation for or knowledge of, but just thinking from what the last 2 years have been for Digimon, what makes sense next, what we think is needed to kind of evolve the franchise, if you want to make the easy pun. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was the next big JRPG. It's really hard to overstate the importance of seeing the Digimon IP on like storefronts like the PlayStation Network and even just local stores. Totally anecdotal, but I worked in like a small retro game store or indie game store around 2015, and people would come in and see the Cyber Sleuth box and be like, "What? No way! That's Digimon!" And that doesn't happen without a game to point at and to play. So I think I'm interested in Digimon Survive. We talked about this in another video that Karn and I collabed on, just to talk about Digimon Con. We think Survive looks exciting, and we can't wait to play it, but I don't know if that's going to be the Digimon game that takes the world by storm, but a big JRPG could. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's important. So I got an interesting reply on Twitter the other day from someone that I guess isn't a huge Digimon fan, but they were saying that they felt like the Digimon IP has lapsed, is kind of gone stagnant, which is completely not true because Digimon has like the card game, the VB, things like that. But I think because people view Digimon as an anime in a video game, when they're not seeing a video game being advertised, they just assume Digimon like isn't doing anything. So I think you're right that I think we do need Survive or whatever comes next to be out there and be physical and also have an element of marketing. I think is important too, that people realize Digimon is still going.
Yeah, and I think that the Cyber Sleuth games were pretty massive, as massive as they can get for a Digimon JRPG in the West. They really took off, and I know you were mentioning that they have sort of confirmed that a story title is in the works after Survive potentially. So do you think that's something that we see and maybe when we see it?
So I think it's something that is going to have a more extended development timeline. Like I said, I have a suspicion that it is being worked on slowly, and that maybe some people on Survive are going back and forward, but I believe it is two separate teams. So I think Survive was always supposed to be this stopgap game, and I think it will continue to be that. But I am curious, as we discussed in my video, there is an element, I think, where tactical RPGs are having a renaissance, so I think there is a good chance that Digimon Survive will be successful, at least with Digimon fans, if not wider tactical RPG fans. But I think Digimon needs to make people aware that the next story game is a real thing and not just in a couple of interviews, I think, to keep that ball rolling, especially for non-Digimon fans who are fans of the Cyber Sleuth games.
Yeah, I think Digimon Survive could be massive. Just as you said, there's kind of a big moment for tactical strategy games right now. But there is also the reality that after that comes out, there is this insatiable appetite for more always. So the question is what comes next? And hopefully 2023, possibly beyond, there is some larger JRPG from Digimon that we see.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I also wanted to talk about, in terms of growing the franchise and what possibly comes next, there is kind of the English dub of Digimon Adventure 2020 to talk about, the possibility of an English dub, I should say. And the thing is, you and I have already seen the show. It's not particularly important to me that I get to watch the show in English because I've already seen it, but there is an undeniable sort of accessibility angle to having an English dub exist. It's purely speculative, but I think that if they're getting this show dubbed in English, it's probably happening through a streaming service at this point. I don't really see a lot of TV networks picking up English dubs unless it's Adult Swim, and they're really only doing, Demon Slayer or Jujutsu Kaisen, like shows that are popular with young adults. And Digimon has sort of a more child-friendly entry point. So, like I said, you and I have already watched Digimon, but there's a million other people who could be interested, but for various reasons can't do subtitles, whether it's young kids' reading capacity or just preference to the nostalgia factor of the English dub. So, yeah, just when it comes to bringing the franchise to more people and elevating things, I think that the English dub could be huge.
Yeah, I think there is, yeah, like you say, there's a lot of people who will want the dub and won't watch it until it is dubbed for whatever reason. And the likelihood is something like a Crunchyroll or something like that getting it. I do see a potential, and not in the same way that they might push a new show, but with, I know in America, all the dub seasons, or at least the first 4 or 5, are on Hulu, and I wonder if that might be an avenue. And I think even Digimon Adventure 2020 might have ended
Yeah, I
up
think
on
I heard the first
for a while.
50 episodes were subbed on Digimon Adventure on Hulu. I don't know what happened, but
Right.
a lot of my commenters were saying, like, I've been watching on Hulu up until 51, and it's just not there. So
Super weird. I wonder if maybe that was the point where a decision to dub happened, and they were like, we're going to dub this thing at some point.
Possibly.
And that might end up on Hulu or Disney Plus or something. Again, not as like a Disney Plus show, but just as something that happens to be on that platform.
And possibly they could have all the stats they need about like the interest. Like, let's say hypothetically it was Hulu doing the dub. They could say, "Oh, wow, look at how many people do or don't watch the first 4 seasons of Digimon on our platform,"
Exactly.
and make an informed decision that way. So possibly.
Yeah, I think it's very likely at this point, given the things that we've seen. And I have to dance around this quite heavily, but I had a couple of people I knew or was introduced to as a result of this that might have attended auditions that were using scripts with names that weren't Digimon, but a lot of the dynamics at play felt very familiar. So it could have been an unrelated anime, but I have some, again, grapevine source, do you trust me, that there might have been audition processes last year for something that felt very Digimon-y, like older brother, younger brother, set of 8 kids kind of vibe. So I think there is a decent chance we'll see it. I don't think it's going to be like you say, something that's airing on TV or is going to do gangbusters, you know?
Yeah. So again, I don't think the Digimon Adventure 2020 dub is something that like the fans, people watching. The hardcore fans, people watching our videos are necessarily craving, but there are so many people I know that just aren't aware that Digimon is still making stuff. And if you are logging into Hulu or Disney Plus or even Crunchyroll and you see like the new Digimon Adventure English dub, or you see a trailer on YouTube, it might possibly blow your mind and get you to check out the new show. So it could be a big way to move things forward for Digimon. The next point I wanted to talk about was my sort of desire for a more mature Digimon story. I wrote here, Ghost Game is sort of there. It's coming close. The kids are a little older than the Adventure 2020 kids. Digimon Survive could be that mature Digimon story that we're looking for. Cyber Sleuth kind of was it, but yeah, I think we need another go around with Digidestined in their later teens, early 20s. I don't know if Digimon as a franchise has much interest in doing this because there's the reality that it's kind of originally a kid's show. It airs on Sunday mornings, but that was really the most excited I was to be a Digimon fan, and what got me back into the franchise was the combination of Tri being about the older Digidestined plus the Cyber Sleuth games following slightly older kids. So I'm looking for a story closer to a Persona 5, I guess, in terms of cast and mature story themes, and I wonder what you think.
So I agree, and I think in many ways that's what I kind of almost hoped Ghost Game was going to be initially. Obviously the kids ended up being pretty young. For some reason I thought maybe they might have been older based on that initial sketch we saw. I think the identity crisis that I think Digimon has to the outsider is that they are targeting, I think, 2 very distinct groups. Whereas a lot of other big franchises kind of can run the gamut or have one group. Whereas I think Digimon is acutely aware they are targeting kids with the kind of Saturday morning vibe, but also that a significant amount of their Japanese and overseas audience is adults who have nostalgia for the franchise. Kids aren't buying a $120 Digivice off Premium Bandai. So I think there is this desire, like you say, with things like Cyber Sleuth, to make those kinds of stories, or with Tri, which is obviously, for us, for people who grew up on Adventure. But it might just be that there isn't time in the release schedule or budget to do specifically like an anime that is that kind of Persona 5 Cyber Sleuthy style thing, or even a game, because the hot topic with Survive and things like that. How do you slot in something like that? I think the next story game is probably most likely going to be that, because even looking to the previous story games like Dawn and Dusk, or was there one in between that and Cyber Sleuth? Well, even if we talk about World Redigitized, which the line between world games and story games gets real thin sometimes, those kids are all older or tackling more mature stuff, even in like Dawn and Dusk, which isn't particularly deep, but in comparison to the more like kids going on an adventure vibe. So I think there is definitely room for it, and I think it's something that Digimon would want to pursue, but it's just like, where do they do that?
Yeah.
My hope is the story game.
Yeah, I think we can see that there. And in Survive, possibly more mature themes. I mean, the first trailer for Survive, which was now, oh my God, like 3 or 4 years ago that they first showed that trailer, but it had the beautiful kind of orchestral music, and it just felt like one of the more mature Digimon stories, although it was just a 1.5 minute teaser. Hopefully we get something really cool and dense there from Digimon, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm now shifting into kind of a wish list, pie in the sky moment here. I don't know how fiscally beneficial this would be for the Digimon franchise, but I had this idea for the longest time of like the Digivice collection app. So, you know, the little adventure games that used to come on, the Digivice toys that you would buy, the D-Arc and the D3. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I thought for sure that would exist on like the App Store, and that I could go on just in the way that Sega will put like Sonic 2 on an iPhone, or Sonic, all the other Sonic games. I kind of thought it would be cool if for a few dollars you could go and buy the Digivice games, and because of the phones, every smartphone's step tracking and things of that nature, you wouldn't have to do the Digivice shake, although you could if you wanted to, but you could actually play the Digivice games the way they were in theory intended, which is go out on a walk. And I know we have the Digivice Vital Bracelet now too, but I think there's no denying the nostalgia factor. If you could go and play the pixel art Digivice games, I think that would be really cool.
So they came, and this is a recurring theme, I think, with Digimon, this close to something really, really cool and didn't go through with it. In Rear Eyes, you have a VPET that your like main partner can get sent to, and while your phone is closed, it'll do the step counter stuff. When you go back to the game, you'll get food and stuff, and it's got a little VPET screen. That would have translated beautifully into like either a companion app or something within Rear Eyes, where, like you say, you could pay like, I don't know, $2 to buy the Digivice, the original Digimon VPET or the Digimon Pendulum X, and have that contained either within Rear Eyes or its own app, and then have that reward scheme be there where you get to raise your Digimon in the VPET, and then maybe you get some bonus items in Rear Eyes. But if they're not doing it in Rear Eyes, I can't see many reasons not to do it, because it's not like those things, obviously it's not like you can just like plug a USB stick into one of them and translate it into a game, so it would require someone to program, but they're super simplistic, and I think the value there, the amount of money they're going to make back from people, because I mean there's a few fan made ones that are, you know, fine, especially if they did do it in a microtransaction thing where maybe you get the original original Digimon VPET free, and then if you want the X or you want the D3 or whatever, you pay whatever that microtransaction might be. It feels like it would cost them so little to do that it doesn't make sense. It's not out there. Yeah,
and this sounds like the biggest first world problem out there, but I mean, although the Vital Bracelet is awesome, you'd have to strap this thing on your wrists and do all that stuff. So if it was just part of your phone, like part of your daily routine, and you could play those old games by going out on a walk, Oregon, shaking the hell out of your phone, I don't know why they wouldn't. And just in the same way, you know, that Nintendo would put out on the 3DS or the Wii, like NES games or Game Boy games, like I could see that being a thing. Or as I said, Sega putting out a Sonic game on an iPhone, like I would like it if I could play an old Digivice adventure on my iPhone.
Definitely.
So last, I don't have too many points here, but I maybe want to give you the floor, not to put you on the spot, but if you have anything to say about what you'd like to see from the trading card game moving forward. I'm not the expert by any means on the Digimon trading card game, but I know you're relatively active in the collecting and celebrating of new card releases and announcements. So what would you want to see the card game do next?
So they are making steps as far as the meta goes to make things better. There's now cards that aren't playable, have been completely banned, or have over the entire course of the game have been restricted. So that's something that I think needs to continue. I think they are going to address, because the main issue I think we have with the Digimon card game on a tournament and meta level right now is that there's like 3 decks that you kind of have to play to win, and that is TCGs at their core. But I think that there needs to be some way to make having fun with it get reintroduced, whether that's de-escalating the power of a lot of cards or just having ultimately a thing where, okay, 1.0 is no longer legal in tournaments or whatever, which isn't great because people paid a lot of money for cards, but that's might be the way it has to go. I think other than that, I think I'd like to see, from like a gameplay or person that likes the card game perspective, they've been doing things here and there that I find really interesting. Like in the new set the set that's just come out in Japan, or is about to come out, they've introduced multicolor cards, which is fun, especially with like the Armor Digimon and the 0-2 Jogresses and stuff. It means you get a lot of fun there. And there's also, they did some stuff where you could have a level 5 Digimon evolve from a level 5, like Alterous mode from Adventure 2020, so that you could make these like crazy stacks and stuff. So I think I'd like to see more fun gimmick playing. I also have this idea, with the card game getting crazier, for people like you who haven't really jumped on board, I think it would be interesting to have a completely isolated, different type of card game, maybe like a deck builder or something that just doesn't ever have boosters. Like you buy the thing and that's the thing, based on Appmon, because no one, like a lot of people are very not keen for Appmon to get folded into Digimon, but I think as Appmon does exist as this Digimon thing that is outside of Digimon, I think it would be a good opportunity to utilize the Appmon property and have that be something that you can just play. Like I say, deck builder games are quite common, that doesn't require a lot of investment, because just like, oh, if if I buy the Appmon game, anyone I play with can play with it, and we can play sort of endlessly. So I think that would be an interesting thing they could do, to keep a simplistic gameplay style to bring in people who might be interested, and then go, hey, if you'd like a more elaborate version of this, go check out the main Digimon card game, kind of thing.
Right, that's really interesting. And then obviously the people who, it serves a lot of audiences, because then the Appmon people are just ecstatic that Appmon is being acknowledged. And then the people who don't like Appmon are saying like, okay, good, it's still its own thing. Like it's not necessarily integrated into the Digimon TCG. That's really interesting.
And then also it doesn't mean that you have to then think about, like, because the grade system is similar to the level system in Digimon, but there is still notable differences. So you don't have to think about that either. You don't have to kind of like work out like, okay, is Gaiamon a level 5? Is he a level 6? You can just exist in his own side game kind of thing. Although I, for the record, would like Appmon to get folded into the main continuity. But that's just me.
One other question, not in the doc, but I just wanted to pick your brain about this for Digimon going forward. And that is, if you want to see the Digimon Adventure 2020 kind of universe continue in the way that, at first, before they announced Ghost Game, we weren't sure if there was going to be a season 2 that followed the same 8 kids, or would we get the 0-2 moment of the new reboot where it's, the character's a little bit older, we follow new kids, but it's taking place in the year 2022. Do you think that could happen? Do you think it should happen? I'll let you go first.
So I have a sort of a weirdly nuanced take on this, and that is that I didn't personally enjoy Adventure 2020 that much once we got into the end game, but as it is a reboot, I have no problem, or even I'm almost curious to see what a 0-2 might look like, because as much as I ended up liking Kizuna, a sequel's potential to absolutely ruin an original property is way stronger than a reboot which is using the same elements but does not change the story of the original. So I would like Digimon to explore things like a 0-2 thing, like something that I think is still technically on the table. Most likely is a Digimon 2020 movie, maybe folding in some 0-2 elements or something, or doing something a bit more our wargamey, even though 2020 did that as well. I think the main issue I have conceptually with like Digimon Adventure 2020 0-2 is not whether it should exist, but more that I don't want to go through 60 weeks of that again. I would like it to be a side thing, not the main anime. So either make it shorter or do it as movies, or like Gaidens.
Yeah, I think I agree there, is that I would probably be nervous to committing to watching or covering another 67 weeks of a show, but I think there's potential in the new universe, whatever you want to call it, with the Adventure 2020 canon. I mean, we never had in that show like a real world arc, so whether they took the route of doing 0-2 and there's been a time skip and we're not so focused on Tai and Matt and those kids, or they just say like, hey, actually, and this would be relatively new to Digimon. I guess Fusion kind of did this, but if we said like, actually, it's going to be season 2 of this cast. I know we went through all the core Digivolutions, but it could be a cool opportunity to do really interesting stuff with slides in the real world, whether or not you introduce the 0-2 kids or not. I don't know. I think where I've left off, and it seems like we're pretty aligned, is that it would be cool to see that universe continue. Don't necessarily know if that's what comes after Ghost Game, but I'm not opposed to it.
I think for me, it's always more interesting to see something new explored as the sort of airing anime, and then have things. Admittedly, there was no airing, or an anime was just finishing as Try was getting aside. But I think something more like that would be interesting to me, to have smaller projects expanding on 2020 while the next thing after Ghost Game starts, or if Ghost Game is going to get a season 2 of Ghost Game. I also think taking that idea with other seasons isn't the worst thing they could do either, because again, it sounds like people that didn't like 2020, the worst thing that could happen, but it's not necessarily like the worst idea to take something like Frontier and try something new with it, or adapt an idea that maybe Digimon never really got to explore, like the Legendary Skies Chinese manga, or maybe even V-Tamer as like an anime. Maybe that could be interesting. So maybe not necessarily directly rebooting, but revisiting ideas of past stuff.
So there's a lot of ways we can take it. There's just a lot of places for Digimon to go this year and beyond. And let me know, obviously, in the comments what you want to see next. And thank you, Karn EX, for hanging out with me. And if you haven't had a chance already, go watch the video on Karn EX's channel and subscribe to Karn EX's channel if you haven't. We have another video there talking about what we want to see out of Digimon Con. Add something to the outro. I'll do something. But
yeah. I don't think there's anything. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to touch on, really. I think that's just a nice little conversation about the future of Digimons. Right, let me